listener production.
Morning, it's Spyrou with you. Welcome to The Briefing. New data shows the rate at which young men in Australia bet on sports has risen by at least 60% since 2015. But what is it exactly that's driving more and more of us to try our luck?
I mean, if I had enough money to live comfortably and not need to, like if I was comfortable with a house and kids and never needed another cent, then yeah, I'd be happy to stop.
My chat with three young Aussies who regularly bet on sports is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, it's time for headlines with Tara Cassidy on Monday, the 24th of March.
Good morning, Chris, and good morning, everyone. We've got some big budget news this morning. Labor's made a raft of savings announcements ahead of tomorrow's federal budget, putting cost of living at the forefront. Aussie households and about 1 million small businesses are set to get $150 wiped from quarterly power bills from July, with the government extending its energy rebate scheme. Opposition leader Peter Dutton criticised the move, labelling it a Ponzi scheme. He pointed out that Labor actually pledged to reduce power bills by $275 a year back in 2022, but since then, household energy costs have gone up hundreds instead. Despite that, coalition frontbenchers have said they will support the slashing of our energy bills.
Now, another controversial comment from Dutton's also become a hot budget issue. This time, it's our beloved working from home. Labor's vowed to help Aussies continue to work from home so they can save on annual transport costs after Dutton said he wanted to scale back those, doing it primarily in the public sector. Now, this all follows the major PBS announcement last week, backed by both parties, with both pledging to reduce PBS prescription meds so we're paying no more than $25 a script. Now, Finance Minister Katie Gallagher came out saying these savings are part of a further $2 billion that Labor's been able to claw back to help repair the budget bottom line, saying it'll bring total savings and reprioritise spending to almost $95 billion, Tara.
Well, hopefully we do see those billions passed on. It's not surprising, though, to see cost of living become a central budget issue, as I'm sure it will be for the upcoming election as well, which we're expecting will be called hopefully within weeks. And the energy rebate, I think, will be welcome news for many people. The ABS actually found that in the government's first round of relief, it shaved about a quarter of our electricity prices, despite Dutton's comment about Labor breaking its promise to reduce household bills. In terms of work from home, I am definitely happy about that one. I personally can totally see how this will bring down costs for people, not having to pay for public transport, fuel for your car. I think this will be a move that will win a lot of young voters and families for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the work from home argument for the coalition is that it decreases productivity, and by that, bosses and managers aren't getting the most out of their employees. I think if the last week has taught us anything, it's that, while the economy is kind of getting back on track, there is more reporting around Australians working incredibly harder for less amount of money. So I think this work from home whole thing is kind of a balancing act that they really need to get right. And while it is winning votes, it is also something that's going to lose a lot of voters on the other side of the aisle. Hey, something else that happened over the weekend that I want to touch on is the shadow treasurer appeared on the ABC on the weekend, and he was made to defend the 36,000 public service sector jobs that they want to cut.
Yeah.
So he kind of came out to say what we've been hearing a lot of the way is that they don't know exactly where these cuts are going to come from. We know it's going to come from the 36,000 that the Labor government has introduced since coming to power, but he was quite firm, Angus Taylor was quite firm, that it's not going to be frontline services, so it's not going to lead to increased delays is what he's promising. He said it's more going to be the back-end things, and his line of argument was that bigger isn't better. Which, I happen to agree with. A bigger team doesn't necessarily mean a better team. I think where he's niching down is that, we need to be getting the right people into the jobs to do the right job. And on energy relief, while he said that the Libs and the coalition support this further bill relief for everyday Australians, he did say that moving forward, there needs to be more of an interrogation into gas and Australian gas and freeing up Australian gas for Australians, so limiting the amount that's going overseas and then kind of coming back to our domestic shores.
To the Middle East now, where the Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 50,000 people have been killed in Gaza by Israel since the start of the war 17 months ago. It comes as Israel renewed its operations in the region after shattering the fragile ceasefire last week. The ministry says the most recent attacks have killed 673 people in the Strip, a third of those being children. The Israeli Defense Force maintains they're targeting Hamas, not civilians, and had issued evacuation warnings to civilians ahead of the attacks.
Yeah, and over the weekend we saw fighting resume in Lebanon as well, Israel carrying out a wave of deadly strikes in the country's south. According to Lebanon's health ministry, at least 7 people have been killed, including a child and 40 others. The IDF says they were responding to Hezbollah rockets fired into Israel. It is the most significant flare-up in tensions between the neighbouring countries since their ceasefire took hold at the end of November last year.
And this all comes while thousands gather in Tel Aviv for a 6th day of protests against the Netanyahu government. Among other things, they're mostly calling for an end to the recent return to fighting and calling for the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza. It's understood there's 59 remaining, and just 25 of which are still believed to be alive.
Staying overseas, Pope Francis has made his first public appearance since being hospitalised more than 5 weeks ago. The pontiff, who is recovering from double pneumonia, made a quick appearance from his hospital room balcony in Rome, giving a greeting and blessing to the faithful who had gathered below. The 88-year-old then made his way to his home in the Vatican City, where he will continue his recovery and remain on rest for the next 2 months. We know that Easter is on the 20th of April, so we're kind of unsure as to what capacity he will return to duties over the next few weeks. But what we do know is that his physical therapy and drug therapy will be continuing in that time.
And I think he's been given a couple of weeks basically of bed rest in the Vatican from what I'd read. So good news that he's back and hopefully he'll be feeling himself again soon. Australian Formula One driver Oscar Piastri has redeemed himself, turning a disastrous end in Melbourne a week ago into his first win of the season at yesterday's Grand Prix in Shanghai. Piastri led from start to finish to claim the checkered flag ahead of McLaren teammate Lando Norris. It was all smiles and seen embracing his McLaren CEO, Zach Brown, following the epic win.
Pretty pumped. I think that was probably maybe the least emotional win, but the most satisfying.
Meantime, it was a nightmare afternoon for Piastri's 3 rivals who were disqualified post-race for technical infringements, including Ferrari pair Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Their cars were both found to be a kilo under the minimum requirement of 800 kgs.
It's so interesting when you hear of like technical issues in such a hugely global sport. Like,
I know.
You don't think these things happen anymore.
Imagine preparing for years and years and years for this and to have the whole thing called over 1 kilo. It would be devastating for them.
We love nothing more than a little bit of pointed EDM to get your Monday morning going. In case you were wondering, yes, we are getting dumber. And not just us two, Tara, but humanity as a whole. Fresh analysis of a University of Michigan study has found that, regardless of age, people around the globe are finding it more difficult to concentrate and are losing their abilities to problem solve. The trend seems to have started around the mid-2010s, according to this university study, having taken a noticeable leap during the pandemic. So we're getting dumber since the pandemic at a bigger rate.
I don't find that entirely surprising. I mean, devastating, but not totally surprising. The amount of time we spend on screens and things like that, I can totally see where this has come from. But apparently we're not necessarily getting less intelligent, but it seems that there's other things that we're focusing our attention on, and that's not doing anything good for our brains. Apparently we were taking up activities that were far more intellectually beneficial back pre the 2010s, and our use of screens, reverting to phones, social media, that kind of thing, it's not doing anything good for us.
Yeah, and I mean, anecdotally, I can speak to that. I mean, pre-2010s, I loved a book, you know? I could sit there and read a book. Now I sometimes engage in conversations with ChatGPT.
Yes, and I think that's a big one. The rise of AI, we're actually now using computers and software more and more to actually do those daily tasks. I know, for one, I have about 100 alarms set up on my phone just to remind me every day to do basic things, which is really alarming. And I'm probably weighing into this trend now, now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's equal parts sad, but also so interesting that it's being documented into studies. So it's great. It's great that there's a reason for, some declining rates of intellectualism. I don't
Going
know
to
if
read a
that's
book.
the right word. Yeah, that's right. After this, Tara, let's pick up a book. We've got a book to read. We've got some catching up to do. Hey, thanks for that. That brings our headlines to a close. Next up is my deep dive looking into why young men in Australia are betting more on sports. Based on the stats, there's a very good chance I'll be putting a bet on the footy at some stage this week. I live in the gambling capital of the world, am a man in his 20s who loosely backs a team and doesn't mind catching a game at the pub here and there. Except I have zero interest in betting on sports. Not because of moral reasons, but because it just doesn't trigger the same neurochemicals in me as it does 33% of Aussie adults who do. But according to new data from the University of Melbourne, that could all change for me very soon. New findings showing the rate of sports betting among Aussie men aged between 18 and 44 has jumped by around 65% since 2015. And they're spending more, up from $85 to almost $110 a month over that same data period. It comes despite tougher regulations around when an ad can run and mandatory messaging around it, like these.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
Chances are you're about to lose.
What's gambling really costing you?
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
While Australians lose over $25 billion a year to gambling, it is perfectly legal and is the most common form of entertainment in this country, with more than 70% of adults doing it at least once a year. According to experts and the government, it poses a huge risk to public health. And when it comes to the rise of sports betting among young men specifically, they say it's due to the ads and apps, and of course their highly addictive design. But for the young blokes who do this every footy season or enjoy placing a bet on a UFC fight or a horse race every now and then, it's a totally normal social thing that's fun and something to chat about with their mates. Some might even say it's totally harmless. Today, we're hearing from three men who regularly bet on sports but feel in control of their habit to hear what they think about the debate. Do they agree that sports betting is problematic? Would they support much tougher restrictions from these companies? And do they reckon they could stop if they had to? Joining me right now in the studio are Ben, Joel and Liam. Before I welcome them, it is worth noting Ben and Joel both work in industries adjacent to sports betting, but they join us today to talk about their own personal experiences with it. Guys, welcome to the briefing. Ben, I'll start with you. How much have you won in the last month from your sports betting?
The last month wasn't a good one for me. If you go off the February numbers, I lost $719.
Okay, yeah. And if you contrast that to, let's say, a good month, what's that?
The February before that in 2024, I won over $1,800. So it all kind of comes out in the wash for me.
Liam?
February, January, I didn't punt at all, actually, because I kind of stick to the footy season. So looking at August last year, I probably lost about $160.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Joel?
On the February statement that I just read, I had 600 put in and 400 pulled out, so 200 down.
Let's just backtrack a little bit. I want to know how it all started for you guys with sports betting or even gambling in general. Ben, we'll go with you. Where did it all start for you?
Yeah, I think it was just always around. I remember being taken up to the local betting shop when I was a child and being at the footy talking about who's the underdog and why they're good value or why not. So I think it's just always been part of my life as long as I can remember when I've been around sport.
It started with me probably with like the Melbourne Cup. That was like the big thing. I think I had like family that was really into horses that still are. And that's kind of where it started was, once a year kind of thing. And then once I kind of got older and understood like the footy tipping and the footy betting, I got into that.
Yeah, I feel like once I turned 18, one of my mates was quite into it. So it was kind of just the freedom of being able to place bets. And it was very small placing bets back then, like $1 on a random horse or a random greyhound or something. But that's pretty much how it all started.
Like I mentioned in the introduction to this episode, I don't have the neurochemicals firing in my brain when it comes to gambling. It doesn't elicit any sort of response for me. But I am curious to know what it elicits for you guys, what emotions it kind of brings out and what brings you back to the betting table or, the betting apps. Free for all, whoever wants to answer first, go for it.
For me, I don't know. It's kind of like having sprinkles on ice cream. Like sport's good, but then if you have a bet, it can make it better. Like certainly the emotions that it elicits out of you is hard to replicate.
Obviously, I love my footy, but being able to like punt on it adds like that little bit extra level of engagement. Like, yeah, you're just way more invested and it kind of gets you excited about the games where you potentially don't have skin in it, like not your team playing, things like that.
You can be watching a random horse racing track in a different country and still be all in as well.
If you spend a lot of time watching footy, you feel like you know the game and you know the teams and how things are going to play out. So why not try and capitalise on that?
I guess for me, where I feel with gambling is that you're putting money into this thing that you're risking getting nothing in return. Does that play on your minds at all?
I feel like the amount that you'd spend a week, this is just for me as well, but I feel like you have an idea of how much you're willing to budget a week, and that could be replicated with someone else buying a pair of shoes or someone buying something that gives them kick or an interest or something, like go to the movies, but you can be watching a game and spending X amount of money, and it's sort of like I don't know, you're kind of prepared to lose it, but if you do win, it's a great time.
Yeah, so I guess for you, it's like, it's your money, it's your choice in a way.
Yeah, 100%.
Could say that about anything.
Yeah.
If you buy shares, you can lose money in shares. So like there's a risk in anything. Anytime you spend $1, there's a risk.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm pretty strict with my spending. Like I do a lot of smaller bets, trying to do like larger odds. And it doesn't come off as often, obviously, but for me, it's only like, maybe $30 a week or something like that. And to me, that's like, if you go to the bar and buy 2 beers, like that's already $30.
Yeah. So for you, Liam, I'm hearing it's very measured, calculated, limited to the footy season. For you two, Ben and Joel, what's the context that you're gambling in now?
Every day? 5 times a week?
Yeah.
Certainly depending on what's on and the time of year. But yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't, during NBA season, sit down and see what NBA games are on and who was playing and where there might be an edge.
Does your betting know a bound in terms of like what sports you're betting on?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't bet on things that I'm not educated in or have an interest in just to waste money unless there was a statistical edge that I could see somewhere.
Yeah, like personally, I'd probably only bet on the NRL and horse racing, but there's sort of times where I have punted on NBA and stuff, and then now I don't, just because I've realised that I don't watch enough of it to actually have a fair chance at potentially making money as well. But yeah, I feel like Thursday to Sunday or Wednesday to Saturday, I'd be chucking on punts most of the time.
I do want to know, the stats are out that this is climbing in young men. More and more young men are gambling, and where the experts are pointing a bit of the blame or just pointing to explain why it's on the rise is they point to the apps. To talk to your point, Ben, you kind of started going off to, I would assume, the TAB, which is a physical store. There's, the barriers there to gambling. Now it feels like the barriers are almost gone. Would you guys say that the apps have made gambling far more easier for you and maybe even more frequent?
Yeah, they've definitely made it easier, but that's on trend with everything in this modern age, right?
Yeah. You can be putting on bets at work and stuff as well because of the apps, but it definitely is more accessible because like you probably, if you're thinking about putting a bet on, there's probably times where if you were going to be walking into a TAB and doing like a face-to-face bet on something during the week, you probably wouldn't do it, but you can easily do it on your phone.
I want to narrow in, Joel, on a conversation we had off air where you were talking to me about some of the clever ways that they market to you. You started off with one betting app and that you slowly downloaded more and more betting apps. Can you explain to us what led to that?
I mean, there's different promotions and stuff on different apps, which you can sort of take advantage of. Like if you join up, different apps, you get adjoining bonuses and stuff, you get bonus cash. They run different weekly promotions and it can be quite enticing. There's also some people give tips on different apps as well that you can only see if you're on the app. So yeah, I feel like the majority of the people I know who do bet as well have more than one app and yeah.
For me, something that I find is that I listen to a lot of podcasts that are involved with football and also involved with betting that heavily promote it, and even some like just strictly betting shows. Usually they're quite entertaining as well, and it's not just like, playing numbers or anything like that. But I find that keeps me engaged with betting and making sure I'm betting on every football game, and every single week I'm putting my bets in.
I do want to talk about the mass marketing of it all. I mean, everywhere you kind of look in Australia, there's a reminder that sports betting exists, whether it's, the name of a stadium, a major sponsor on a footy jersey, a TV commercial, a radio commercial, as you mentioned, podcasts. It's to the point that studies have found 3 in 4 Australian kids can recall at least one sports betting brand without being prompted. Would you say, well, first and foremost, I would say that's successful marketing, top line. If we take it from a corporate level, that's very effective and successful marketing. But would you say that this aggressive marketing campaign has influenced any of your behaviours?
I'd say no for me. I don't see how that is any different to, say, fast food, which also has detrimental effects on a person. And I'd say, I don't know the stats in front of me, but the 4 out of 4 kids could name fast food joints.
That's also true. Yeah, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a single child in Australia who couldn't name a fast food chain. Fair, I take that point.
Personally, I'd be doing it regardless. But yeah, they definitely are quite prominent. But yeah, as you said, there's marketing is everywhere, and I mean, there's a lot of different companies and sort of industries that are fueled and go around because of the gambling apps and companies. Maybe
when you're getting into it and they're trying to acquire customers, but when it's part of your lifestyle, I guess, then the advertising, to me anyways, is more just water off a duck's back. Like you're not going to one certain bookmaker just because, that was a good ad or that's a good promotion, because you get to a point where the promotions don't apply to you anyway.
An interesting point that I wonder if you all have an opinion on is, there's a cost of living crisis, and people's spending and ability to spend has reduced significantly. But we are seeing record increases in gambling and sports gambling. We're seeing that is statistically up and higher. Has the cost of living had any bearing on how much you're spending and betting as of late?
Not really, to be honest. Yeah.
I'd say that it's probably what has prompted me to keep my spending and betting more strict. A few years ago, I was probably betting on a variety of different sports and, all through the year and betting for the sake of it or betting with friends. But now I'm like, this is how much I'm spending each week and I'm only going to bet on this. And yeah, so it probably has affected me, yeah.
I want to turn to gambling harm. Obviously, we can't be having a conversation about gambling without touching on this. We know that 1 in 5 of all Aussie men aged 18 to 34 are reporting at least some form of gambling harm. And look, there are limitations to the data because it's self-reporting, but it gives us a bit of a picture of what we're dealing with here. So that's 1 in 5. It's 4 of us in this room. I'm not making any suggestions. However, I will say some of the signs of gambling harm are spending more money than you can afford to, increased irritability during or after gambling, itching to put another bet on after losing, feeling guilty or remorseful, skipping work to gamble, which is something I've heard, and not in this building, of course, but I've heard people doing that. And the last one is hiding it from others. Do any of you have any experience with any of those, indicators?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't had, little bits of a few of those for sure, for sure.
Which ones in particular?
There can be times where you have like a 5-leg multi that hits 4 and the last one misses, and you definitely feel irritated for sure after that. There's terms of hiding it from different people. I'm comfortable sharing it with my mates and stuff, but there are other people who I'd probably, I wouldn't be going out and telling them and showing them all my bets and betting history and stuff.
I've certainly got some loved ones who probably just wouldn't care and don't want to talk about it. But then I've got other loved ones who are interested, and that's maybe all we talk about. So it probably evens out a little bit. But in terms of the harmness, like I would say there's way worse forms of gambling than, say, sports betting, like poker machines and things like that. I've certainly had friends where they've shown like serious addictive qualities and it's really affected their life. And that has spiraled out of control way more than I've ever seen mates, people around me have with sports betting.
I second that. I think I definitely, when you turn 18, you start going to the pub with your friends. I'd notice a lot of guys that were spending 90% of the time when we would be there in the pokies, and that's something that didn't personally interest me. But I think to what Joel was saying, I've definitely had some frustrating moments where, you miss on one leg or anything like that. There's probably one time where I had like a really big night and a few really, really terrible big bets that I woke up feeling quite regretful, and that was kind of the end of that for me.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see how that is an issue, yeah.
Okay, so an inevitable question that comes up in these conversations is someone will ask you along the way, have you ever tried to stop? Could you stop if you tried as well?
I mean, look, there's been times where I mean, sometimes I've been overseas and haven't punted for I was overseas last year for about 5 weeks, didn't place one bet as well. So, I mean, I could stop, but there's times where, I mean, I don't do it. But I'd say the majority of weekends, like I've already put some bets on for the weekend ahead. So, yeah, I'm sure I could, but I'm not in a position at the moment where I feel like I need to.
Yeah. Ben, I see you nodding along, but also shuddering ever so slightly.
There's certainly been times I've, had a bad day and you just go, okay, let's take the foot off the gas here and just get away. But in saying that, if I wanted to stop overall, if I lost the enjoyment or I was consistently losing over a long period of time, then I'd have no qualms in just stopping altogether.
Global health experts, though, they define gambling as a public health issue, and they kind of frame it in a way that the industry will present an argument that it's only a small amount of people who are the problem gamblers, and those are the ones that prop this industry up, and that's why, it's not all gamblers, essentially, is what the narrative the industry likes to perpetuate. Where experts and governments are concerned is that it's everyday Australians like us who have a cheeky punt here and there, have a little bet here and there, and we also support this industry through casual betting. And for that reason, there's stronger pushes now that the government legislate more heavily in this area. The most recent and tangible one being a limitation on sports ads and, limiting them and removing them from our TVs, from our radio stations, from our podcasts and from online, more importantly, our social media feeds. What do you think of those efforts?
Where do you draw the line? Like banking industries do plenty of harmful things that don't get spoken about. Are we going to stop bank ads? I understand that it can be harmful in some people, but you can't just tell people how to live. Like the industry in advertising contributes, millions of dollars to, it keeps people's livelihoods and jobs intact as well. It keeps the sporting industries afloat. So where do you stop?
If they were to remove sports betting and sports gambling ads, I feel like there'd be a few industries that would crumble.
Sports betting companies turn over around $50 billion a year. When it comes to media spend, they spend $250 million a year on their advertisements. So that is money that gets poured into the TV industry, the radio industry, that props up thousands of jobs. On top of that, we know that the NRL and the AFL, they take a cut of the bets that are made. According to reports, we know that the AFL and the NRL, they receive at least $40 to $50 million a year from these betting companies. So that is a reinvestment back into sport. And there's, a whole list of things that sports does in this country to justify its existence. Liam, I'm curious to get your take on this. Do you think a ban on the sporting betting ads is a good idea?
So I don't think that a ban is necessarily a good idea, but it is tough when you've got, young people recognizing those names and knowing where to go and how to just download the app on their phone as soon as they can.
What would it take for you to stop in very few words? What is it that will take you to just stop and never place a bet on sports again?
I mean, if I had enough money to live comfortably and not need to, in the sense, like if I was comfortable with a house and kids and never needed another cent, then I'd be happy to stop if that made people happier.
I mean, I'd be happy to stop if I was at a point where I was damaging relationships with people that cared about me. I mean, I feel like personally, I think about, I was going to say if I won the lotto, but I honestly reckon if I had that much money, I probably would still punt for the enjoyment and stuff. So I feel like the honest answer is if I got to a point where I was damaging relationships with people who care about me.
That's a much better answer than mine.
And then we'll end on Liam. Liam, take us out. What would it take for you to stop?
Probably similar. I think I do it more for the enjoyment than I'm really trying to win and like actual money. So to stop, I don't know. I think I probably could just stop. Yeah, I think I found enjoyment out of enough other things related to football to stop.
Yeah, well, Ben, Liam, Joel, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having us.
That was in unison. It is worth noting before getting to all the back announcing that these three guys that we spoke to today say they are all comfortable with their gambling habits, and that's just not a reality for everyone in this country. And just like anything, our own personal experiences form our view of whether something is harmful or not. Remember, if you or a loved one is experiencing gambling harm, help is available. You can visit the National Gambling Helpline website or call 1-800-858-858. With that said, that is it for this episode of The Briefing. Thank you so much for listening, and it was an interesting conversation hearing from three blokes who have three somewhat very different opinions and views on this. I'm curious to know where you stand after listening to this. What were your key takeaways? We'd love to hear it. Reach out to us on socials, on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, on TikTok and YouTube. You can search Listener Newsroom. And don't forget, we'll be back with a brand new episode from 4 p.m. with Tash Belling, and I'll see you tomorrow morning with Tara Cassidy from 6 a.m. I'm Chris Spyrou. Catch you next time.
Listener.